It's such a joy to have this fireside chat. I don't think that anyone here knows, and we'll get into this a little bit, that you really are giving the gift of yourself when you speak to an audience. And I know we'll explain that a little bit, but it's remarkable after so much time to see that everything is so fresh and everything is so new for you. It's the prayer that we all have in our hearts for ourselves. So thank you for that example, Mary Ann. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Montse Alvarado. I'm the president and COO of EWTN News. I was with all of you earlier today and had the privilege of addressing you. Thank you for the gift of your ears, of your hearts, meeting some of you. Mary Ann is completely right. It's incredible to see that the future of the church is in wonderful hands, wonderful feminine hands. Let's get started at the beginning. Who were the major influences in your life, Mary Ann? Who or what shaped the woman that you are today?
Well, the older I get and look back, the more I realize, although I didn't know it at the time, how much I was influenced by being brought up Catholic by Congregationalists. Now, I realize that might involve a little explanation, but way back when a Catholic married a Protestant, the Protestant, in this case my mother, had to sign a contract promising that the children would be brought up Catholic. And my mother, being the good Protestant that she was, took promises very seriously, and so did her whole Protestant family, which meant that my brother and sister and I were, from the beginning, we were sort of forced to be little theologians. And we grew up in a small town. We grew up immersed in two cultures. And what I got from my Congregationalist relatives, and for which I'll always be grateful, is a strong sense of the importance of good works, of public service, and patriotism. But what I got from St. Agnes Catholic Church, where they took me every Sunday, what I got from St. Agnes Catholic Church was a love for the beauty of Catholicism. I loved the Latin Mass, which linked me to all Catholics living and dead all over the world in places that I'd never seen. I loved the stories of the saints and the pictures on the wall with all the stories from the Bible. I loved the beauty and the music. And so I was sort of gratified years later when I read this from then Cardinal Ratzinger. He said, "The best arguments for the Catholic faith are the holiness of her saints and the beauty of the art that she's inspired." So after that, I was introduced to the great Catholic intellectual tradition. Heart first, brain later. And of course, I was very attracted by that and impressed that my Jewish professors at the University of Chicago were treating Augustine and Aquinas as important guys, our guys. So, as John Paul II said, faith and reason are the two wings by which the soul ascends to God. Now, apart from that, I was very lucky to have wonderful teachers and professional mentors that helped me with various things, but for the real questions about life, the meaning of life, what is the good life, how do I live it, for those sorts of things, I have to say my mentors, and this is why we need GIVEN, yes. My mentors were books. They were works by different writers at different stages of my life, the spiritual autobiographies of Dorothy Day, of Thomas Merton. Then very important for me were the example and the writings of John Paul II, Benedict's Introduction to Christianity. I loved the poetry of Jared Manley Hopkins, still do. The great Catholic Italian novel, The Betrothed. So I could go on, but I think the fact that I had to look so much for wisdom and guidance in books really just underlines what I was saying. We really need, for young women in those crucial years, 21 to 35, we need GIVEN Institute.
Well, while every young woman writes down every single book you just mentioned, we'll give everyone a second on that one. How does a woman, and I say this as a young, well, not so young anymore, I met you in my 20s, right at that moment. And we were working together at the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. By the grace of God, you were on that board, and I knew nothing about anything, but I knew who you were. And by chance, by coincidence, we met in a bathroom right before you were going to speak and I was going to translate the great Mary Ann Glendon's speech into Spanish at a conference. And I just kept thinking, what do I say to her? And you know, she's like fabulous and washing her hands, and I'm just frozen. And so I figured I should wash my hands too. And then magically managed to get a couple of words out. And what does the wonderful and great Mary Ann Glendon say to me? And you probably don't remember this, but I remember this like it was yesterday, such an important moment in my life. Do you have Aquanet? I think I will carry Aquanet in my purse for the rest of my life. Never will I be found without Aquanet. That is the secret to the hair. But aside from Aquanet, from your vantage point as a professor and a leader who has done so much from being in your local community as a woman in the pro-life movement to reaching the highest echelons of the Catholic leadership, how does a young woman in her 20s embark upon this discernment of career and family, or both? How do we do that?
Well, first I should say that I should be interviewing Montse because we're still in mourning over her having left the Becket Fund, and she really can speak to all of these issues from the point of view, and here's where I'm going to answer your question, the point of view of a young woman today for whom that discernment is much more difficult than it was when I started out. I had other problems. There were no women in any of the professions. But, you know, that was really simple compared to what discernment for someone age 21 to 35 has now. And I think especially for women who think that they may be combining family responsibilities, work outside the home, plus their baptismal mission to be a transformative presence in the world. And I think, you know, you are exactly the woman that GIVEN is trying to reach. And I think that what we have to say to those young women is that don't let anybody tell you that you can have it all. If you go that road, of course the Catechism tells us that all of our works and undertakings are in fulfillment of our mission if we do it with the right spirit. But most of the woman who chooses those things is going to have to contend with is trying to keep all of those responsibilities in some kind of proportion. And that is going to mean that, at least in my case, it means that you always have the feeling that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You notice I never use the word balancing. I mean, balancing is not... so in order to keep your priorities straight, you really need not to give up on your prayer life. I would say that's the most important thing.
Your professional experience has all kinds of different layers to it, both as a teacher and as a leader. How did you then come to serve the church? A lot of us think about our professional lives, and we also have this running narrative in the back of our minds that really should be at the forefront of our minds about service to the church. How did you come into that?
Well, I already told you about my disastrous first attempt, but after that, when I could, I became involved in a small way in the pro-life movement in Boston, and together with some other women, we got very concerned that back in those days, the pro-life movement was being treated in the press as indifferent to the concerns of women. And so we formed an organization that we called Women Affirming Life. And we said, we had a motto on our letterhead that said, we are pro-child, pro-woman, pro-life, and pro-poor. And so that took up, that was about all I thought I could do in the beginning. But then I figured out that I could direct some of my academic research toward questions that weren't getting proper attention. So I did a comparative study of how abortion is regulated in 26 Western nations. And the study showed that the United States, after Roe, had a far more extreme approach than any of those other countries. That, strange to say, and I don't think it could happen today, but that book, which won a prize and was published by Harvard University Press, that book was what got me an offer from Harvard Law School for a tenured position. As I say, it probably, Jinwei, you know, it probably couldn't happen today. But the book and probably my position at Harvard led to my being asked to do a lot of things for the Archdiocese of Boston. And then I realized that what I really did have to offer was not teaching, but it was writing. And I did a lot of writing for them. And to make a long story short, that led to my being asked by the Holy See to do a number of things as well.
Your expertise and your comfort on stage make anyone who thinks about doing what you do a little intimidated, I would say. What personal challenges, we all have personal challenges, what personal challenges did you have to overcome in your professional life? And was there an unexpected encouragement when you actually overcame it?
Well, you speak of my comfort on stage. There's a story behind that. I had a lifelong, well, it's not lifelong, but I had for years and years a real phobia about public speaking. And if any, in a group like this, there probably are more than a few who have that. And if you have it, you know how agonizing it could be. And I became aware when I was in high school that that was going to be a real handicap. And so I worked so hard to overcome it. I joined the drama club. I entered an oratorical contest. Nothing worked. And that phobia stayed with me until I was in my 50s, until I went to the Beijing conference, where I was on stage all the time, and I had an important job to do, and it suddenly left me. And I didn't have time to ponder it at the time but after I got back to Boston, I told a friend of mine, religious sister, I told her, you know, the strangest thing has happened to me. I had this horrible phobia, and it went away. And she looked at me and she said, well, Mary Ann, I think the Lord wanted you to know you didn't do it by yourself. The only question I have is, why did it have to take so long?
I'm laughing also because isn't it always the religious sisters in our lives that tell us these very hard truths? It's kind of savage, you know? And we've commiserated over this, but I will say, and I think it would be great for you to elaborate on this, the beauty of those friendships, that partnership between lay and religious, both in intellectual exchange and in prayer life, in spiritual formation, in walking together, and sharing the feminine expression of the church. It can be difficult, can be joyous, can be a mirror that you don't really want to look into. That friendship with Sister Christine, where did that come from?
Well, for my generation, without having anything like GIVEN, to whom do you talk about your challenges, your fears? Basically, it's with your friends. And, your friends, they always want to encourage you and tell you you're great. But those religious sisters, they lay it on the line. And, you use the expression spiritual friendships. Those can be terribly important, and for women of my generation, they were crucially important.
Yes, it's that vision of what heaven looks like manifested on earth. How do you avoid, you think about some of the issues that you have had to deal with, very complicated issues. How do you avoid being overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenges before you?
Well, there's no kidding ourselves about the magnitude of the challenges. The basic challenge for all of us is how to be a transformative presence in the world. And then, the church tells us lay people that we have a special challenge, and they really said it very strongly. They said that the transformation of the secular sphere, the places where you work and live, that is so much the responsibility of the laity that it can't be performed adequately by anyone else. Now, those challenges are huge. They are really huge. And I think the first thing is to take them very seriously. I like the idea that of Pope Benedict's, that he told a little boy who asked him, how does a little person like me change the world? And Pope Benedict said, you begin by changing yourself. And when you change yourself, you've taken back that little part of the world. You've transformed that part of the world, and then that can grow and spread. But it's not easy.
It's not. When you think about formation and the call to the Great Commission, is there more there that we're supposed to ask from ourselves?
Well, I've been sort of wondering when the Catholic Church and its various institutions are going to wake up to the fact that pretty soon it's going to be the 2000th anniversary of the Great Commission. You know what the Great Commission is, right? It's when Jesus, in his last meeting with his disciples, said, go forth and make disciples of all the nations, baptize them, and instruct them to teach what I have commanded you to others, or something like that.
It's pretty close.
I'm not a Bible scholar,
but
that commission is coming up fast, and I do think that could be a wonderful opportunity for GIVEN to think about it among their future projects. And I do think, I know that our Protestant brothers and sisters are already intensely preparing for that great event in the life of the church. And so I think maybe we could drop a hint to some of our Catholic groups and leaders to get busy on it.
Noted. We all make big plans, big plans. We're here with our plans, offering our plans to God, hopefully so he doesn't laugh at them. When things don't work out, when everything that you put together and all of the hard work just doesn't turn out the way you thought it would, how do you fight discouragement in that moment?
Well, I'm an expert in that because in 2013, Pope Francis asked me to be on a commission to investigate the bank. and then the Vatican Bank, and then to be on the new board of directors of the Vatican Bank. And boy, that was 5 years of feeling like my efforts were going nowhere. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, I think we have to get over the idea that we are going to see the results of our efforts, and maybe the idea that we don't know whether our efforts are doing any good. Although I would say, I say this about the Vatican Bank. When I said I would do that, an American Monsignor in the Vatican said, "Be careful, the devil lives in the Vatican Bank." and you know, when he said that to me, I thought he was kidding. But now I'm not so sure. Well, of course, if you think what you're doing is worthwhile, then you just have to intensify your prayer life. But I have something else. I have what I call a spiritual medicine cabinet. And that's the front door of my drawer of my desk, where over the years I've copied and put away little slips of paper of just words that I've read or heard that I found helpful. So it's like having all these little medicines in there. And for the moment when I feel like I'm not seeing results and I'm not getting anywhere, favorite is John Paul II, who said something like this. He says, "There's a great temptation in every spiritual journey to think that everything depends on our ability and our efforts. But what God really wants from us is to cooperate with His grace." And then he reminds us of the story of Peter and the other disciples are fishing all night, and they're not getting anywhere, nothing is coming up. And then Peter says, "Lord, at your word, I will let down the nets." And John Paul II says, that was the moment when Peter opened his heart and allowed the word of Christ to pass through him in all its power. I think that is really a wonderful remedy for the problem you described. And another one I like, should be in everybody's medicine cabinet, is the prayer of John Henry Newman, where he says, "I know that God has created me for some definite purpose. I may never know it in this life, but it will be told to me in the next. Therefore, I will trust him." And the prayer goes on, but I think that we should keep in mind in those situations.
Awesome advice. Now I need a medicine cabinet. I hadn't heard that one. That's not fair. We're all here as mentors and mentees, most of the people in the audience, others who are just sneaking in to hear this fabulous conversation. What advice do you have for mentors and mentees as they embark on this relationship and this project together?
Well, I think everybody here knows more about mentors than I do, but one thing I have found important to keep in mind when I'm talking to usually a student, somebody who wants advice, is it's important to attend to learning what is special, what is that individual's distinctive gift, and then try to help them discern and maximize and develop what those things are. Where mentees are concerned, people who come to you for advice are usually very idealistic young men and women. And so they'll often say something like this: "I want to make a difference." In fact, when I was on the admissions committees, I would say that was on every other admissions application I ever read. But, and that's good. I mean, it is wonderful that they want to make a difference. But I think that we would do them a service if we would say to them, "You will make a difference, for better or worse. with all your actions and omissions. And so, what matters, the real question is what kind of a difference? And that is the question that they and we ought to constantly be asking ourselves in fear and trembling.
In fear and trembling, absolutely. Mary Ann, you and I both share something about our lives that is special, I would say, because I spoke this morning about the importance of forgiveness and the importance of recognizing that wounds also make you who you are. And we both have walked in the church with stops and starts, not in our faith, but in the reality of our relationships. What would you say to a young woman who wants to get married, but doesn't know what she's looking for? What kind of advice would you give her in who she surrounds herself with and the relationships that she has in order to prepare herself for what would be seen as, especially today when people don't know even how to relate to each other post-COVID, the most difficult decision you could make, choosing a partner?
You know, I mentioned looking to books as mentors. I think the writer who has been so wise and has so much to teach us on that kind of question is not a Catholic. It's Jane Austen. But of course, you often only read her after you've made all the mistakes.
That's exactly right.
But she's the one.
I think you gave me the best advice, which really shaped the way that I look at marriage, and it's surround yourself with beautiful and holy marriages. It's the best piece of advice you ever gave me. Surround yourself with what you want to see. And I will thank you not only for giving me an example and a roadmap of what it means to be a faithful woman, God willing, an intelligent woman, but what it means to really search for deep, loving relationship that will affirm Christ in my heart.
And Jane Austen says, don't settle for anything less.
Well, I think we can leave it there. Thank you so much, Mary Ann. Thank you.